So the next one that we have is actually dealing with independent filming, as we have all spouted love for James Rolfe, aka the Angry Video Game Nerd. He is an independent filmmaker who, yes, has a focus on this, but he also does things like horror films, and so this is why it's also kind of relevant in this regard. A couple of weeks ago, he was put under the spotlight because plagiarism? So basically what was happening was, I can't remember if, I think they were like the earliest Monster Madness that he had ever done.
Yeah. It was literally the first episode of Monster Madness for 2021.
For some reason, the Universal Horror one was the first one he ever did. But yeah, so specifically, the video that we're talking about is his review of 28 Days Later, where he actually was, his script was actually riffing off of an article that was being done by, I can't remember which organization it was. I want to say Deadline, but that probably is because Romney brought up Deadline. But yeah, it was actually ripping off an article that of another movie review of 28 Days Later, and James Rolfe was reading it verbatim. So a lot of people jumped down the throat of James Rolfe, basically thinking this is another Philip Mewson situation, except, you know, with a longer time frame. Here's the resolution that has happened from that. And I'm happy to say that there is a resolution. Seems there was a hiccup with one of their new staff members because, you know, James is now to a point where he can actually have like full-on crews help him with these projects, including the writing, including the camera work and all that stuff, so he can kind of focus on being a director. And so what happened basically is they brought a new person into the writing department, and usually what happens when you have somebody else writing this, I'm pretty sure Romney has done this once or twice, I've done it, where we have something in mind that we want to say, or that we want to highlight, and so we look for articles and then just kind of patch in stuff until we can rewrite it to retool it the way that we would say it, kind of thing. I know I've done it. I don't do it regularly, but I do know that it is done.
Yeah, I haven't done it for reviews, but I mean, that's pretty much what college students do for papers they're having to do for pretty much any of their classes.
Yeah.
That's pretty much college writing 101, is basically taking bits and pieces and then reworking them and rephrasing them so that way it comes across as an original version of the information.
Basically what, in this case, it separates the wheat from the chaff, kind of thing. Those who actually do retool and those who just use it. And so what happened here was there was a hiccup in the process, and that hadn't been rewritten or reworked, and it went to James. And so at that point, James read it and immediately was pulled aside, or not immediately he was pulled aside, but as soon as this happened, he was pulled aside by his YouTube rep that he hires, basically saying, yeah, this has happened, and now we need to take care of it.
Yeah. Wasn't actually the YouTube rep, it was actually more specifically people within Cinemassacre that brought it to his attention once.
I had heard it was like an MCN rep or something.
Yeah, because I actually looked at the official statement that James Rolfe put out on the subject, and basically it was a case of, hey, once this was brought to our attention, we here at Cinemassacre realized, hey, let's fix this. So they've since taken the video down, and they say, hey, we're going to rework it and rewrite it and put up a new version. And he was pretty clear saying, hey, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We're glad that we caught this early, so that way this won't happen again.
Yeah, and so and thank you for pointing that out, because basically James put out a statement. He did damage control immediately and said that, and one of the things that I will also highlight him for, and this is why he's an independent filmmaker and not a Hollywood creator, is that he didn't just immediately fire the person. He did say that the person got a stern talking to, roughly, which is what you would expect, because mistakes happen, especially in the schedule that James tries to maintain. Whereas in Hollywood, you'd have a Christian Bale situation of, oh, good for you, and then the person's just fired, which I've never been a fan of.
Or alternately, there would also be the alternate route of putting out a blanket statement and hoping for it to all go away, is the other way Hollywood tends to do it.
Yeah, so at that point, I'm glad that the person could learn from this and be able to keep his job, because we've all made stupid mistakes like that, and we don't hire people Okay, so at that point, I think James would understand that because he's been that guy who is recorded in his office and had to do all that, so he understands that process happens. But I actually am going to applaud James Rolfe for how he handled this. I know that a few people on Twitter and Reddit are still going through everything that he has, thinking they're going to find another golden egg for themselves. I just don't think you're going to find it. Because I think in a lot of cases, he's probably also done that internally.
Yeah, and plus looking at the actual segments that the video that pointed it out highlighted, like, some of the segments were verbatim and an argument could be made, but there were some parts of it that were different enough that I would argue, okay, some of these you're reaching a bit because there was extra information added. There was,
and I want to bring it to you, Romney, because I beg you to find a different way to be able to do this, because I have never been able to do it. One of the ones that was highlighted as clear plagiarism was him trying to explain the basic concept of the plot. And so what he was basically saying, and you have this character who is unbeknownst to everybody going through this. And I'm literally looking at all of this and going, what the fuck is plagiaristic about that? Like, I've had to write things like that sound exactly similar. And it's simply because that's how you have to do it. That's plagiarism? F that.
Yeah, especially given that, and I didn't like, because the video we're going off of is from Tipster, and I didn't like the way Tipster tried to articulate it as, oh, there were like filler words and stuff like that. I looked at that and I'm just like, that's a reach. Now, some of it was verbatim, and that then an argument could be made, but there were a lot of the other segments in the video that Tipster was referring to, which by Tipster's admission comes from a group called Cinemassacre Truth, which very much is a group that has been gunning after James Rolfe for reasons unknown.
That's what I'm saying.
Some of it was a reach, but I at least, to echo the accolade, I at least applaud James Rolfe for realizing, hey, let's get ahead of this, let's actually fix it, rather than, doing nothing like a certain other prominent online creator that is often compared in the same circles. You all know who I'm talking about. Don't need to say it.
Yeah, I think I know. But the problem here is okay, you're gonna have detractors. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But I think a lot of people just don't realize, like, yes, he went to film school, he went to art school, but he's also had to learn business. Like, he's had to run this as a business for far longer. Because, like, he was running Cinemassacre, I believe that was his company when he was editing for companies. So at that point, like, he's had to run this from a business standpoint for years.
Yeah, because
he has done more than some of those other creators we'd like to mention.
Yeah, plus his content predates YouTube. So he wasn't even doing the whole, I'm making money off their ad revenue. Even back in those early Screw Attack days, he was selling DVDs, he was selling merch. He's been in the game for a lot longer than most of us.
It wouldn't surprise me if, while he was a kid filming horror movies, he was learning everything he could from the directors that he could, like, when he could get an interview and get his hands on it, he was learning from all of them. And all of them were sharing business stuff. And so at that point, like, he's been able to gain a whole lot of wisdom out of that he has since applied to Cinemassacre. That's why he's as successful as he is, and they aren't. In some cases, that's why they're in the ground, he's not.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a few years ago watching an older video that he had released saying, hey, this was something I shot back in college. And it was literally a documentary he had made of his own films explaining how he was editing this compilation. And he even showed that he was selling, like, DVDs that had, like, these old short film compilations even before doing AVGN. So, again, he's been doing this a while. He knows what he's doing, and that's why he probably took the approach of, hey, let's get ahead of this, fix it, and handling it like a business person should. And so it's a case of where he's been in the game long enough to know what to do and what not to do.
The other thing that also was kind of irritating to me is I never saw this, and maybe I know Alex has watched the podcast from here on in. Somebody was trying to tell me, somebody was saying online that Pat the NES Punk was immediately trying to bury James because of this, and it just kind of backfired. I mean, Pat's had situations where that's happened. I don't think it happened with James, though. I never saw a video clip.
Now, I haven't seen anything out of that, and because Pat, I'm pretty certain I haven't watched too much recently, but last I've heard, Pat's still on very good terms with James.
Yeah.
He's pretty amicable with him. I can't imagine why he'd be burying him.
Everybody's on amicable terms with James, and I think part of that is just because James does not hold grudges.
Yeah, he's a consummate professional. From what I've heard,
he
a
keeps
lot of
business in business, and he keeps personal in personal, and that's something that a lot of creatives on YouTube, on Twitch, need to do more of.
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, Alex. Go ahead. Give us
No,
your thoughts
I mean,
on this whole situation.
yeah, that's really it. As far as the whole situation goes, he absolutely handled it like a pro here. I have to also share Romney's kind of gripes with Tipster's video because it's like some of the parts that Tipster in particular was picking out in some of the article that was the subsequent other material Tipster was referencing to. It's like, okay, some of it is a little bit overlapping, but some of that's also just because it's a plot. So it's a general summary of the plot, of the storyline.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some overlap. But, James in turn definitely handled it like a professional. And so I'm glad this was just a little minor blip, a little minor hiccup in Monster Madness of this year, considering it's been in hiatus for the last several years now.
Right.
So, it's sad that having to bringing it back again, something that he's very passionate about.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like, all the stuff
that's
held it back. Like the movie did, I know that, but
well, just other things he's doing. The nerd he still wants to do nerd episodes. I know he's been working on a book of his own.
Oh, that's right. He is working on a book.
And a lot of it was also just the YouTube stuff and just the fact that YouTube would flag a bunch of videos or take a bunch of the episodes of Monster Madness down because of content violations, even though it's a movie review. I know that was also a major reason, and that's why this year's Monster Madness is not on YouTube. It's on the Cinemassacre website, and it's hosted through Screenwave, precisely because YouTube has pretty much made doing those kinds of reviews all but impossible. I mean, speaking personally, that's why I have the Martial March 2020 mega marathon version, because YouTube's just made it impossible to have the single individual reviews without them getting immediately taken down.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to give major props to James here, because first of all, the response that happened here, like, let's look at this from a Hollywood standpoint. It would take 4 to 5 days and like 2 or 3 PR firms before we got any response on any of this from Paramount or whomever. James did exactly what should have happened, and the response was immediate. And immediately, and at that point, I think he even kind of admits in the video he doesn't have all of the details that he wants to bring up, but he does say, okay, this has been spotted. We have talked with this person, and I'm still going to emphasize just how awesome he is for doing this. He didn't fire the guy for doing this. I knew college professors that like literally looked at people and said, if you get so much as get my coffee wrong, I will fire you and you're out of this exercise, kind of thing, because that's how people at news stations would act in some cases. So I'm going to give him major props that he said, okay, you committed a mistake. You know what? I've done plenty of those. Go ahead and go back to work. Now you need to learn from this. Okay. And so not only did he say, okay, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. We have addressed it. I've talked to the person. We are now going to continue moving forward, and we will also make sure to double check, basically cover our own ass and make sure that we haven't done this more than once, kind of thing. That was exactly what needed to happen, because like I said, Hollywood would have done this 5 days later, and everybody would be like, okay, what are you trying to cover up? His was immediate and therefore plain and transparent as day. I mean, obviously, if we hear otherwise, I'll be happy enough to eat crow. But I'm gonna compliment James on how he handled this, especially and I agree with you guys. I think Tipster kind of hit some things that were dumb, but I also think that the video that he was referencing, they were hitting dumb things too. So at that point, yeah, it was the one that I could get right off the bat that was covering this. And so at that point, I wanted to make sure that we had that.